Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Nearly 10 years after Dragon Age Inquisition, we finally have a follow-up in Dragon Age The Veilguard, and today we're talking about the performance of this game on Steam Deck. I've played for a couple of hours now, so these are my early impressions of how this game runs on Valve's handheld. This is just the start of the game, but hopefully it will give you a good idea of how it runs and whether or not you'll be happy with the frame rate and the performance, or whether you prefer to try it on something else. So we're starting off with low graphics here. The game starts you off at low, and I've set the FSR settings to balanced for this footage. The game does also have Intel XeSS, but it seems to be quite similar performance really, so I've just stuck with AMD's FSR. So at these settings you can see the frame rate ranges from the 30s to the 40s in this opening area. It's bright and it's colourful, but it is a little pixelated because of that dynamic resolution from FSR kicking in to try and stabilise the frame rate. It does keep it quite steady, but I did notice a few times when it dips below 30 frames. And you can see this is playable. You don't get a huge amount of detail, but on the smaller screen it works quite well. So by default, if you just want to play, then it works okay. I did want to try taking off FSR to see what that's like. So here are those low settings again, but with the FSR removed completely, and I've also taken dynamic resolution off. So this does lower the frame rate a fair chunk. We're now hovering around 30 most of the time, but you can see on just this stretch running through the forest, you know, you've got sort of lots of trees and leaves and grass, stems, foliage, that kind of thing. So you can see it does fall below 30 quite a few times. So I'm not too sure that this is an option. On the whole though, low settings aren't too bad if you do have FSR set to balanced, but it definitely suffers with FSR switched off. So those are low settings. What about medium settings? The footage now is the medium preset with FSR set to performance. Now, unfortunately, we can really see things start to dip under 30 FPS. Not all the time. There are some points in the gameplay when it manages to get above that, but during combat, it's pretty consistently in the 20s when you've got some spells flying around, you know, characters are more animated and in action. This is early game as well, and I think combat is pretty basic in the early game. I've seen some trailers and gameplay released by BioWare of later on in the game, and there's a lot more complex spells and effects flying around, and so I kind of imagine that adding in those extra details will mean that the Steam Deck struggles even more the further we get into the game on medium settings. Now, just to see if we could get a frame rate over 30, here is medium again, but with the FSR set to the ultra performance, so this really attacks the resolution in order to give you more frames. And you can see that it's working. You know, we're getting 30 to 40 frames again like we were on low, but it really feels so pixelated. I didn't enjoy playing this way at all, and I really feel like any improved graphics that you get from changing to the medium preset are just completely lost by the FSR being so aggressive. You can't make out any of that extra detail whatsoever. So I didn't try high graphic settings. I just felt like with how medium went, there wasn't really any point, and it seems like if you want to play this game on Steam Deck, then you're gonna have to stick to the lower end of the settings and aim for that 30 FPS mark. I do think that the art style means that this still looks good, especially on the smaller screen, and you know, it's pretty fun. It doesn't feel too bad to play at 30 frames per second. You know, combat is kind of fast paced at points, but once you get used to 30, I don't think it's so bad. But just be aware that if you want 60 frames or if you want high graphics when playing this game, then you might have to play Dragon Age The Veilguard on some different hardware. So finally, these are the settings that I think work best. This is the low preset with FSR set to performance mode, and I felt like this gave the best balance between graphics and frame rate. You can see on screen that it mostly sticks to the low 30s. There's an occasional drop to 29, but really I think if you locked the Steam Deck screen to 30 Hz at these settings, then you'd only very occasionally see it drop below 30. Most of the time it would stick there. And since you're not trying to push into the high 30s, it does give AMD's FSR some wiggle room to let the resolution settle out a bit nicer. And these are the settings that I think that I would probably continue to play on for the rest of the game. So there we go. That is the performance of Dragon Age The Veilguard on Steam Deck. I do think it's playable, but you've got to stick to the lower end of the scale. It's a little bit of a shame they've not gone for a hyper realistic art style, you know, so you would have thought that maybe the performance would be a little bit better, but at the same time, the world around all the characters does look pretty incredible even on low, so it's not too hard to understand why it struggles to run a little bit on Steam Deck. Now bear in mind, these are just the first couple of zones in the game. These are just early impressions of performance. I did notice at some points you go into places like caves and the frame rate improves because there's not as much going on around you. So it may be there are zones with less happening and the frame rate increases a little bit, although I guess, you know, that it's also possible that there are zones that are worse because the opposite is happening. Hopefully that helps you if you're considering this game on Steam Deck. This is a bit of a different video for me. I'm just focusing specifically on performance and trying to get out some early impressions of a newly released game. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Was it useful? Did you enjoy it? Is there anything you think I should change up if I want to do more of these? And if you're interested in more Dragon Age The Veilguard, let me know as well. Are you impressed with the game and how it runs? Are you happy to play it like this? Or does it kind of put you off and you think you might play it on something else instead? Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.